The global competition to secure access to semiconductors is perhaps the most vital competition of all the battles for resources on the planet. It affects national security, civilian economies like no other single item. Most chips are produced overseas, and to lower American dependence on foreign producers, Congress passed the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act in 2022. President Biden recently announced Intel would receive $8.5 billion provided by the legislation. Intel will use the funds to build and improve plants in Oregon, Arizona, New Mexico, and Ohio. Some 30,000 U.S. jobs will be created in the process. For more on the grant and the CHIPS Act, we are joined by Chris Miller. He's the author of Chip War, the fight for the world's most critical technology. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with this $8.5 billion for Intel. Why is that important specifically, and what does it tell us about the implementation of this big piece of legislation, the CHIPS Act?
Well, this is the first big multi-billion-dollar grant that is being issued as part of the CHIPS Act. For Intel, it's an important vote of confidence in their large-scale capital expenditure program as they build and upgrade plants across the country, and as they try to shift their business so it's fit for purpose in an age of AI chips playing absolutely a central role in the U.S. economy. And for the CHIPS Act as a whole, it's the first of what's going to be a series of multi-billion-dollar grants to different big chip makers, which is at the center of the U.S. strategy to revitalize its own chip-making industry.
And I want to get to artificial intelligence in a moment, but one of the great things you write about in Chip War is the changing fortunes of Intel as a chip producer. The CHIPS Act is about this larger race, mostly with China. What's the state of that race right now for microprocessors, and where is China and where is the U.S. in that race?
Well, the U.S. still has a very strong position, but in the specific sphere of chip manufacturing, which is just one of many difficult parts of the process to make an advanced chip, the U.S. has indeed fallen behind over the past couple of years. And Intel is one of several companies that is trying to help the U.S. catch up, not to China, but actually to Taiwan, which is the world's leading chip maker. But that matters because there's more concern than ever about the security situation in East Asia, where today most of the world's advanced chips are made.
And Chris, the U.S. obviously wants to protect Taiwan for that very reason you mentioned. Also, the U.S., the Biden administration, has been trying to throttle China's access to the component parts, the component processes to make these advanced chips. How's that going? We've seen leakiness in things like Russia sanctions, China sanctions. How have the efforts to keep China from this technology, how have they been working?
Well, I think every sanctions regime is leaky, and this one is no exception. But even with the leaks, what you find is that Chinese firms still wish they had more access to foreign-produced chips, above all American-designed chips that are used for artificial intelligence purposes, because these chips are absolutely critical for training the most advanced AI systems. And so right now, Chinese firms do face a disadvantage, and the entire Chinese AI ecosystem faces a disadvantage because they can't access these most advanced chips at the scale they would like to.
And Chris, help us understand the needs of artificial intelligence. Is it that they need a tremendous amount of just computing power in a single chip, or is it that they need lots and lots of chips, or are there different parts of AI that require different kinds of chips and it's more complicated than that?
Well, there are many different applications of AI, but the key trend over the past several years have been what AI experts call the scaling laws. That means the bigger the system you train, the more effective it is. And if you want to train a bigger AI system, you need more and more computing power, which means large numbers of ultra high-end chips. And so if you look at what companies like Microsoft or OpenAI or Google are doing, they're acquiring some of the world's most advanced chips in vast quantities to use them to run huge amounts of data through their AI systems. And this has been the key factor that's allowed AI to progress so rapidly in recent years.
And so very briefly, we're in an election year. What ideas, thoughts should voters have in mind as they evaluate two presidential candidates? Or is there a question that candidates should have to answer with respect to this competition over microprocessors?
Well, I think actually what you've seen is that semiconductors have been a rare bipartisan issue in the US. The Chips and Sciences Act was passed with bipartisan support in both houses of Congress, and the export controls on China, which we mentioned, were also supported by both Democrats and Republicans. So I think this election has a lot at stake, but chip policy will probably be pretty similar, regardless of which party wins, either in Congress or the White House.
Chris Miller, author of Chip War. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.